Okay, first off, let's get a shocked face meme. Then we're gonna need to get something a bit stronger. Okay, let's get one thing clear. If you're easily triggered by sensitive material, as the kids say, do not watch this video. Obviously, I'm not going to show anything graphic, nor am I going to defend this movie. For my own personal reasons, I do not like it. But I get a lot of requests to cover it, so understand that this is not an easy film to talk about. After all, doesn't the title kind of speak for itself? You've been warned.
Alright, so, during the height of the grindhouse exploitation cinema era in the 1970s, there was a strange cannibal boom popularized by Italian filmmaker Ruggero Deodato, who directed the controversial classic Last Cannibal World. Soon after its release, some nutjobs in Germany thought, hey, let's get the same director to make another movie in a similar vein. So Deodato accepted the offer, but this time, he didn't just want to make another video nasty destined for the banned bin of obscenity. Nah, our boy wanted to make something with sincere artistic integrity, something that commentated on the state of the world and would truly provoke and challenge sensibilities. So he made this thing. This film is hard to stomach. It makes French extremity look like a Disney production, and that's probably the politest way of describing a film banned in over 40 countries and led to the filmmakers being prosecuted for obscenity and even murder charges, but we'll get to that later. Despite releasing in 1980, it never officially received a rating in the UK until 2001, after several substantial scenes were cut to appease the BBFC. Before that, home video releases didn't legally require a classification, and it ultimately served as a loophole for many graphic films to distribute and become easily obtainable to children. And here we are thinking Watership Down gave us a hard time. When ratings became enforced, many of these video nasties, as they were called by the Obscene Publications Act, did receive classification, but UK law prohibits any animal cruelty or mistreatment to be shown in public exhibition, so naturally Cannibal Holocaust had a tougher time dodging censorship. And if that statement is anything to go by, whew, this is going to be a bumpy ride. Before we get into this monstrosity, let's firstly talk about its notorious production history to literally set the scene. The film was shot in the Amazon rainforest during the summer of 1979. During casting, Deodato hired inexperienced actors from the Actors Studio in New York and emphasized English-speaking Italians both for distribution and demographic purposes to give the film commercial credibility. They then shot this non-union production using cinema verite techniques to create a sense of authenticity. But the real kicker to that authenticity was Deodato's harsh treatment towards the cast and crew, who were already disgruntled over payments. For example, actress Francesca Ciardi objected to the idea of showing her breasts during a sex scene, resulting in Deodato aggressively rebuking and humiliating her. While in another scenario, the unpaid native extras were forced to stand in a burning hut without any proper safety precautions. Oh yeah, and then there was the whole fiasco of nobody being too fond of the idea of killing actual animals. Every animal death in the film, such as the turtle, tarantula, snake, coati, monkey, and pig, are all real, uncensored, unnecessary, and very unpleasant to watch. Admittedly, I'm only sugarcoating the finer details for the sake of time and sanity, but to get to the point, 10 days after premiering in Milan, the film was confiscated by authorities and Deodato was arrested and charged for obscenity. And it didn't help that the film was already being distributed deceitfully and unethically, but that was the least of their problems. As a result of their lack of professionalism and or humanity, shall we say, the more people that saw it during its theatrical run, the more rumors spread over the possibility that the deaths depicted in the film were real, thus resulting in it being labelled a snuff film, and Deodato's prosecution was extended to include murder. In fact, long before the Blair Witch Project pulled the whole realism card by pretending the actors had gone missing, Deodato had his actors sign contracts agreeing not to appear in any public media for 1 year following the release of the film to maintain the supposed authenticity. Bear in mind, this was the first found footage film ever conceived, so nobody had ever seen a film like this before. Naturally, it was mistaken as real, and it didn't help that it practically was, bar the human deaths. While the courts dropped the murder charges following the appearance of the actors claimed to be killed, they still banned the film due to animal cruelty laws, and Deodato, the writer, producers, and a European representative of United Artists Production Studio, received a 4-month suspension after being convicted of those obscenity charges. Deodato continued to fight for the unbanning of his film before the court's approval in 1984 with the VM18 cut version, which was basically Italy's version of the UK 18 and US NC-17 rating.
Now that we've got the controversial history out of the way, we have to explore the actual content of the film, so let's just jump into it.
For the uninitiated, Cannibal Holocaust is probably not the film you think it's going to be. It's about an anthropology professor called Harold Monroe, who's commissioned by network executives to produce a televised special on a documentary film crew who went missing whilst looking for a primitive tribe in the Amazon jungle. But once he meets the tribe himself and obtains the missing footage, he realizes that this crew, who are praised by the public and media as being these brave, profound filmmakers, are actually, pretty terrible people.
Okay, one question about your son. I just want to know, what kind of man was he?
My son was a son of a bitch, and he was no good. That's it. My son is dead. I don't want to talk about him no more. Now leave me alone. Goodbye.
The film is effectively a social commentary on media and Western ignorance. The missing crew and the executives who want to broadcast the found footage think that they are the correct, dominant civilized species and treat the tribe as inferior and borderline monstrous. Yeah, sure, in the eyes of a globalized, technologically developed world, they're seen as primitive and uncivilized, but what this tribe does to survive is far different than what we take for granted to survive. The ignorance of the film crew, which lead to their admittedly deserved demise, plays a twisted irony against them, as they are the ones performing horrific acts of cruelty they know are morally wrong, and the tribe are only responding in kind to the crew's actions with what they perceive as their natural way of life. This tribe is seen by the executives and the film crew as the antagonists, but from our understanding through the eyes of the anthropologist Monroe, who comes to understand and respect this tribe's way of life, the real antagonists are actually the film crew.
It's worth clarifying, it's easy to overlook what is admittedly quite a remarkable narrative shift given the nature of its production history. I mean, you have an exploitation filmmaker making a movie about exploitation, yet his actual methods of presenting immorality were also completely immoral in return, so this film has a pretty repugnant reputation for being outright hypocritical for the sake of its own art.
In fact, critic Robert Fershing best summarizes the issue by stating, "The fact that the film's sole spokesperson for the anti-exploitation perspective is played by porno star Richard Bolla should give an indication of where its sympathies lie." So yeah, in a way, you have a film that's questionably neutral on the matter, but its emphasis on anti-media exploitation is contradicted by the fact that Deodato himself is an advocate of exploitation cinema. Sure, media exploitation and exploitation cinema are two different things, but both of them are still equally sensationalist. You're basically trying to derive sympathy from a very unsympathetic filmmaker. It's complicated. But keeping the focus on the intent of the story, Deodato conceived the idea when following news coverage of the Red Brigade's left-wing terrorist activity in Italy during a national outbreak of violence associated with revolution. Deodato noticed that the media focused on sensationalizing the violence as opposed to objectively covering the context behind the violence. So Cannibal Holocaust became a reflection of the breakdown in journalistic integrity and presenting a false and/or biased image of events distorted by preconceived opinions and beliefs.
You must admit it's exceptional footage. I didn't expect such impact, such authenticity.
I don't think exceptional is the right word.
You don't?
No. I mean, what's exceptional about a primitive tribe like the Yakumo being terrorized and forced into doing something they don't normally do?
Come on now, Professor. Let's be realistic. Who knows anything about the Yakumo civilization? Today, people want sensationalism. The more you rape their senses, the happier they are.
Ah, yes, that's typical Western thought. Civilized, isn't it? That's what Alan thought, and that's why he's dead.
The film crew make this tribe out to be barbaric and hostile, and yes, they are, given their culture, but the crew ultimately disturbed and interfered with a way of life they should not be trying to control, or in their case, dominate. However, what's interesting is that the film doesn't present itself like a horror movie. In fact, it has a very twistedly deceptive opening. Reitz Ortolani's calming and pleasant score, accompanying innocuous helicopter shots of the Amazon rainforest, don't even attempt to allude to what kind of film this is going to be. Think of it as the opening to The Shining, but with relaxing music instead. Dare I say, it's quite a clever subversion, since this is a film about media deception and how perspectives can change depending on context. The film aims to keep you completely detached from what's about to happen, so the sentimental tone is surprisingly fitting to skew your emotional perception. And this continues into the news reporter talking negatively about primitive tribes practicing cannibalism, while the film cuts around the busy streets of New York, as if to imply this is what they think is objectively the civilized way of life. Already, the ignorance of Western culture is clear, and it's only perpetuated by the arrogance of the film crew demonstrated in their performances. And from there, the film takes this established perception and aims to dismantle it as aggressively as possible.
There was an expedition in 59 and another in 67, and neither of them came back.
Yeah, that was Smith and that bunch of Frenchmen.
Yes.
Yeah, Frenchmen. They were amateurs, a bunch of jerks. They never succeeded in doing anything.
For us, the difficult doesn't exist, and the impossible takes just a little more time.
We'll be back.
The film is very efficient with the information it gives you. There is no mystery or ambiguity to the conflict. The crew's demise is made abundantly clear, and it's presented by Monroe as a cultural and social miscommunication. But given the unwillingness for the public to accept this different way of life, the real conflict of the story is trying to, in essence, rationalize it.
How could you explain what a movie is? He just felt that they were a threat.
Why do you say threat?
Well, the Yamamomos understood how important these film cans were to Alan Yates and his crew. They thought the silver boxes contained power. A power which I must say again caused much damage and violence.
Fantastic story. Thank you, Professor Monroe.
You're very welcome.
Let me just take a moment to reinforce my point by saying that no justification is given to any action committed in this film. The movie always sits in a morally grey area and relies on the differing perspectives of Monroe and the executives to gauge a discussion. When Monroe protests showing the footage because it distorts the reality behind the kind of people this crew really were, it proceeds to show us, now shifted to the perspective of the executives, how the crew used Mondo documentary tactics to stage real events for dramatic purposes. They shoot one of the natives in the leg, follow him to the tribe, and terrorize and force them into a burning hut to stage a real massacre, with sentimental music returning to accentuate the repulsively sensationalized intent behind it. What's interesting is the executives are totally unfazed by the film crew's actions, and still want to broadcast the footage out of context. To them, it's not an issue of morality. They simply want to make compelling television and nothing more. However, in a last attempt to convince the executives otherwise, Monroe reveals another tape that escalates the matter even further to show the crew gang rape a girl who is later killed by our tribe, and the crew leader Alan shoots another crew member to capture how savage the tribe are in mutilating a corpse. Yeah, I don't feel a need to say anything more than that. At this point, remaining in the perspective of the executives, the actions that follow, which also include the female crew member succumbing to the same assault as the tribal girl before the rest of the crew are killed, essentially leaves the entire room, including the viewer, completely cold and disgusted. And the ending is right in the middle of the conflict. We don't get the sensationalist outcome, nor do we get the truth revealed to the world. Instead, the executives order the tapes to be destroyed, so rather than tell the world the story, they simply choose to forget it.
Cannibal Holocaust is a film that solidified itself as being unethically produced art. I can appreciate subtext in a film, and I'm not trying to be a social justice warrior about it, but that doesn't justify or condone the means from which it's made. That's why it's such a difficult film to talk about.
Cannibal Holocaust aims to leave a bad taste in your mouth, and for me, it's a taste that I can't get rid of when it comes up in conversation. But at the same time, it doesn't aim to be entirely vile for the sake of it. The actual story it tells is admittedly a genuinely compelling one, and is arguably still relevant today. Although, with the context of its production history applied, it still leaves me feeling uncomfortable, distressed, and immoral just for watching it. But isn't that the point?
Hey folks, thanks for watching. Please leave your own thoughts in the comments below because I'm very curious to see what you think. If you want to help support the show and help it grow, you can do so by supporting me on Patreon, where you can get early access and also vote on future videos. And until next time, you can follow me on Twitter, where you can keep up to date. And yeah, stay safe, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.